All right, good morning. This is the second video. Let me move my chair out of the way so I have some room here. This is the second video for lesson 13. Again, I hope everyone's doing well out there. So let me just talk about the goals here real quick. And before I start, I guess I should double check that everything's in the screen. I don't know why I felt that it wasn't, but it is. All right, so our first goal is going to be to review congruent triangles. How we determine if triangles were the same shape, same size. Remember, that's what congruent means. Our second goal is to understand what congruent marks and arcs imply. Okay, so there's ways that in the picture I tell you things. I don't directly say them. I say them in pictures. I'm talking to you in code, right? And the last thing is that we're going to recognize the angle, side, angle, triangle congruence pattern. And so let's go ahead and get into our first goal. Remember that triangles are congruent if there exists a sequence of rigid motions that moves one triangle perfectly onto the other triangle. And before we went on spring break, we were doing problems where I asked you how to take this triangle and move it by either a translation or a rotation or a reflection so it lands perfectly on the other triangle. And we started off with real simple one rigid motion, meaning either a translation, a rotation, or a reflection. And then we moved into the problems where there was multiple transformations. So you might need to translate and rotate, or reflect and rotate. There was just a combination of these rigid transformations. But again, the definition of congruence up till today meant that you could take one triangle and move it using these rigid motions and it lands perfectly on the other triangle. So today we're going to see another way to say, hey, these triangles are the same shape and the same size. Okay, so I can check off our first goal. We reviewed what it means to have congruent triangles. Again, it's moving one on top of the other so that they're perfectly the same. The second goal is we're going to understand what congruent marks and arcs are. Oh, I marked my shirt. I do that so much. And let me grab another color so that we can actually see some things. So again, we want to understand what congruent marks and arcs imply. And remember, congruent means same size, same shape. So the shapes themselves can be congruent, or the parts that make them, the shapes can be congruent. So shapes are made from sides and angles. And so here I have the second goal. Okay, and these triangles are kind of not very well drawn, but they're going to have to do. Anyways, let's talk about the marks. Okay, so if I see a mark like this, a little tick mark, and I see it in another shape, that tells me that the length from A to C is going to be the same as the length from X to Y. So seeing this little mark right here tells me very quickly that the length from A to C is equal to the length from X to Y. Okay, so that would be us talking about a length. Now remember, I can talk about a shape. So I can have a shape that's the same shape and the same size. So I can say that the segment from A to C is the same as the segment from X to Y. Now notice up here I have two marks. And what that tells me is these two sides must be the same. But this side is not the same as this side because this side has two marks and that side has one mark. So I know that this shape is telling me, remember, these pictures are going to tell you things without telling you, right? And so we have to pick up on the facts, you know. So I know that the length from B to C is also going to be the length from Z to Y. Right, because they're equal lengths. That's what those two marks are telling me. Now, I could also say that I have the same shape, that's the same size, so I could say segment BC is the same as segment ZY. Now, that takes care of our marks. Now I'm going to talk about our congruent arcs. Okay, so marks are for sides, arcs are for angles. And so here angle A has one arc, as well as angle X. I'm going to just talk about congruence. So I'm going to say that angle A is congruent to angle X, and angle C has the two marks as well as angle Y. So I can conclude that angle C is congruent to angle Y. Okay? So the marks that are on shapes tell you things. And it tells me who must be the same in each shape. The mark tells me about the sides, and the arcs tell me about the angles. Okay? So I did mention that we're going to have another method for congruent triangles, and it's what the last lesson was about. I wanted to actually build triangles by copying an angle, a side, and an angle, and show you that if I had that, then I have congruent triangles. So all today's homework's about, all that it is about, there's only one thing that every problem is about. Every problem on this assignment is, do you have this pattern? An angle and a side and an angle. The side is between the angles. And if I have them in both triangles, I can then say that triangle ABC is congruent. So I went the one mark, the two marks, the no mark. The one mark, the two marks, the no marks. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle JLK. It's very important that we get the order correctly. Okay? So again, the entire assignment, all that we're trying to do is we're trying to see if we have this pattern. Now, the first 4 questions are, you're going to say, do I have this pattern or not? The next 4 patterns, the question is going to be, what else do you need so you have this pattern? So, you're either going to need an angle or a side or an angle. And so it's going to be up to you to figure out which of these you need. But again, we're only looking for this pattern. It has to be the pattern. The mark has to be between the arcs. Okay, so that's today's lesson. Again, if you have any questions, please ask through the Remind app or through email. I don't check the Google class until I'm going to grade the document. And if you ask me a question on a homework assignment in Google class, I don't see it until I grade. So if you had a question on today's lesson and you asked it today in Google class, I wouldn't see it till Friday. But if you asked me on the email or on the Remind app, I would see it today and I could get back to you today. So please don't ask questions in the Google class. I'll still respond. It's just I'm getting back to you so much later than I would like to be getting back to you. So again, I hope everyone is doing okay out there. Let me just remind you what this is about. Congruent, we verify congruency not only by a sequence of original motions, but now we're verifying congruent triangles by having this specific type of congruent pattern. Alright, so again, that's today's lesson. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to turn this off before I sneeze. Have a good day, everybody.